Hey there, all you hep cats, cool kittens, you guys and dolls, you diesel-powered disciples of cool, friends and foes. Welcome to a very special surprise edition of the Impossible Podcast. I am your host, the artist also known as the comic book loving, time-traveling prophet of pop culture, the Shaman, the bamboozleist, Big Daddy Cool. You can call me Johnny. And joining me is the infamous one, the father of Nashville, Middle Tennessee geek culture, the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, Lucas Leverett.
Good evening.
How you doing, Lucas?
Pretty good. You know, I just had dinner, watched a Trevor Noah comedy special, so I could get in the lighthearted mood to talk about the least important things among our futures in our culture. And I poured myself a brandy, so when you discuss heavy issues of business and state, you gotta have a brandy, right? That's the tradition.
Yeah, I'm drinking water.
I'm going to develop a reputation of somebody who never podcasts without a beverage.
I like it. Well, so we are here live on the Impossibilist channel, League of Impossibilists, and the group page. And this was kind of a little secret surprise podcast today. We did this with Jeff Lester on Saturday and helped promote his fundraiser for his daughter's lymphoma treatment.
Yeah, I saw that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and several hundred viewers. And so I thought this would be the best vehicle to the best channels for Lucas and I to talk about general pop culture stuff. So this isn't necessarily specific to the League of Impossibilists, but since I am the leader of the League of Impossibilists, I can do what I want. So
I do what I want.
Yeah. So as we're discussing, those of you who are watching, and I see there are 4 people watching so far, maybe more. The Facebook counts are kind of, I don't know, not always accurate, but let us know that you're watching. Post a comment, share this video with other people, and we will respond. We will answer questions as they are appropriate. But let us know you're here because we don't know you're watching until you tell us you are. So, Lucas, I thought and look at this. So before we get into our main topic, Eli Cash just joined us, and he just donated $100 to Jeff Lester's fundraiser for his daughter's lymphoma treatment. Eli, you're incredible. Do you know Eli, Lucas? I'm sure you've met him, maybe.
I think so. Yeah. I'm so bad about names and faces, so I had to have all of it.
He is one weird, crazy little dude, but he's super creative, super talented, and maybe one of the most generous people I've ever met in my life. So thank you for that, Eli. Thank you for doing that. So Lucas reached out to me, and we've been having some friendly discussions about what's going on in the world with the COVID-19 crisis, and in particular, how it applies to the American cinema industry. And Danny Kazam says, "Hi from Happy Hollow, Canada."
There we go.
Hey, Danny. So we've been talking about, what's going on with the American theaters, movie theaters, and what it might look like post COVID. And Lucas, I'll let you kind of lead off with where you think we are and what you think it means for the industry. And then I'll add my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, you and I were talking, a little background for people that have tuned in. I was asking around as I started to build more of first I realized I needed a space to have video communication. We all have had that revelation in these past few weeks. And I got to thinking, this overlaps my interest in participating. I've been invited time and again to participate in different podcast discussions and never really feel like I'm equipped for it. So I got my act together. I finished up the room that I'm in for a lot of purposes. And one of them would be to have a good spot for video. And then I started asking friends, what's there to talk about? What should I do to get my feet wet? And part of this is to just participate before I go and do any of my own content. And the topic, I don't know which one of us talked about it, but we came up with this idea that, somebody should banter in the geek world about the future of the cinema business. It's one of the first things to fall. I think you were the first person to tell me about AMC's bankruptcy struggles, and that's something that has been alleviated a little. And then yesterday I got wind of the headline that they're starting a feud with Universal, and I made a post about that on my blog's Facebook page, on the Stump page, and then I commented further on my personal page. And I've got a lot of colorful things to say, but it just seems like a terrible idea. And the more I think about it, the more there are some really interesting things we've noticed that I think we're going to cover tonight when we chat.
Well, now I haven't heard about the feud with Universal. What's going on with that?
So AMC's CEO is the mouthpiece. I assume, I would hope that there have been some discussions inside AMC that this is a group feeling and that this is not just a CEO going off at the mouth, but maybe it is. They're going to ban Universal films from their cinemas because Universal has made it clear that they learned from releasing Trolls direct to the home that model made a ton of money, and that they want to do it for a lot of releases, and they want to do it simultaneously for a lot of movies, and they plan to experiment with it. I forgot if they said they definitively will do it for every movie, but they've made it clear that it's part of their future business model. And he's waved the flag that they're traitors to this long-standing split 50-50 on revenue that the cinemas have had, and it crossed into a couple of things for me. One is, when you're one of the hardest businesses it's going to be to open up again, with most of the challenges in front of you, AMC is the one with the self-serve soda machine. There are a lot of problems that opening AMC back up is going to create that they had to tackle. And then you're going to run off at one of the big studios. And I found myself, we rented Invisible Man for a real small little movie night a few weeks ago, and it was $20. And I have a history back when I had more free time of being a pretty active wrestling fan. I was sitting there thinking, $20 is not bad. They really could get more. And the response.
Well, when you think about the average ticket is between $11 and $15,
right?
$19.95 for a family movie night is a bargain.
Yeah, it really is. And so I got to thinking, in terms of like boxing and MMA and old school wrestling model of the pay-per-view, they could get $40-$50 for a movie. Why isn't this guy out there saying, okay, that's cool, we need to talk about how to make it worth it to everybody, instead of just going off with we're going to ban AMC or ban Universal films from AMC. So that topic yesterday got me defending, of all people, Universal Comcast, which is the last entity I would probably come cavalier to defend, but it just seemed idiotic. And on top of that, the night that we tried to rent the movie, I had been told, hey, you can rent AMC Direct for $20. Like, oh, cool. And I went looking on the app, and I looked on their website. I couldn't figure out, what do I do, click to rent this movie? And then I started looking through my other services, and I found out that Apple had it for $20. I'm like, what the hell with that? I'm just going to do Apple. And so not only did they make it hard to give them money, which is like business rule number one, don't do that. Then he's going to go out there and complain that the other people in the business have seen that, hey, perhaps we can make money all around like this. So I feel like there's going to be a model, and now is not the time to be throwing the gauntlet around like it sounds like he did yesterday.
Yeah, Crystal Raven said she agreed with the that it's a bargain. And I don't know about the service you used, but we didn't rent, we bought something for $19.95, a new release a couple of weeks ago. on Amazon Prime. You know, they have movies you can rent, or the new releases you have to buy.
Right.
And the 1995, but you own them. You own the digital copy from that point on.
Yeah, and $20 is not bad. You know, that's the norm for a movie rental.
For DVD, well, for
not a rental, for a purchase. A movie purchase. I think you know, we'll talk about all the logistics and all the realities and the cancellations that you've mentioned that have been really troublesome, or postponements.
Yeah,
but the price just seems like it's an experimental low rate that could be. I mean, if I were him, I would have said, that's great. You go ahead and release simultaneous and make it $30 and give AMC $10 for every one of them, and we can call it even.
See, that would be a great solution. When Comixology, which is an app that I use to read comics digitally, and right now, during the last 2 months, that's the only place to get brand new comics, and the only publishers that are releasing them are the very small independent publishers. Marvel, DC, IDW, Dynamite, Image, they all said, you know, pencils down. And they haven't been releasing anything, not even digitally, for the last 2 months. But when Comixology started 6-7 years ago, I forget exactly, they initially had a program where when you bought a digital copy of a comic, you put in your zip code, and it came up with a drop-down box of your local comic book shop. And they gave that comic book shop a spiff.
That's cool.
That's how it started. And then Amazon bought them and ended that program. But the same thing could absolutely be done with view-at-home movies.
Well, who in there? I mean, Bond is Universal, right? James Bond.
I don't know if it's Universal or Sony. I don't know.
Used in this, I'd have to look it up to make sure. But you know, there are big films that it seems like you'd be crazy not to keep doing business with Universal. And I realize it's probably bloviating to get a better deal, but it just seemed like a really weird. It didn't seem like the kind of headline that I would hear from AMC. I had to dig to look up their whole funding thing. There's a confidence now that they'll avoid bankruptcy because of something like a $500 million infusion. Basically, they're going in the hole more, but they're not going to be bankrupt, which is, you know, that, and then this on top of it. It doesn't sound like the right path to be on. But it seems like the first headline you'd hear from AMC should be, other than not going bankrupt, should be plans to do amazing things to revolutionize social distancing at theaters, or plans to put dine-in in all their theaters to keep people from pouring their own Coke. The proactive ideas seemed like they would lead, and then here this comes. Like, what? And it was wide. I mean, it's covered by Verge and CNN and several others yesterday. And that's just, that doesn't seem like good news to have out there when you should be reinventing your industry.
Yeah. James Bond is United Artists, Columbia. Metro Goldwyn Mayer, Columbia. Golly, that's right. A lot of layers.
Get the line.
But Joe McKeel says AMC does not like the digital rental model because they can't get $10 for a bag of microwave popcorn. Well, it's a little bit better quality than microwave popcorn, but there is some truth to that. The films are not the big profit maker for the theaters. It is the concessions, and that's always, in my mind, kind of been a problem. That seems like that could be easily remedied. I don't know all of the ins and outs of, the distribution deals with theaters, but seems like a theater should be able to make more per ticket than they do.
Well, it's the classic You know, and of course, people that know us know that you and I come from two different positions in the spectrum of social and political opinions. But like grown-ups, we also like to sit around, associate with each other, and talk about those ideas, and don't consider them to be personal insults. It's one of our biggest strengths, I believe. And from my point of view, my commie liberal point of view is, we're talking about a business that has built more and more ways to spend little to no money doing business, yet still raising their prices. So they've either had a bleeding hole.
You're talking about the theater
business. Yeah.
Okay.
They've either had a bleeding, like they've either had like an arm chopped off that's just spewing cash and they can't plug it, or they've been digging deeper and deeper to just gain more beef on the ticket, the people's ticket. And, you know, you don't have to pay a projectionist to assemble film anymore, which is the job that I had. I assembled episode 1. It was a neat experience, even though, you know, the movie is not regarded as that great. It was really cool to build my own copy of episode 1 and watch it by myself in a movie theater. But you don't have to pay a guy to sit there and do that anymore. You download it automatically, in most cases, download a film, and the rights are managed remotely. The tech isn't cheap, but at some point that's going to be paid for. You know, all these mechanical realities have changed, and really the concessions have changed. In AMC's model, they have the same exact labor involved that an average sandwich shop does. They've got the touchscreen Coke machine. You go and do the labor, which I love that. I mean, that was one of my favorite things about them showing up in the market in Nashville was I don't have to goof around as long anymore. If I have my ticket already on my phone, I just have to spend a moment buying a cup, and then I can go deal with me. I don't have to wait for the teenagers that have got their first job and they don't know how to do anything, and they're still learning how to be efficient. They're still learning how to assert themselves and communicate with other people. I don't have to get in the middle of that, you know. And they were doing the opposite, because Regal was doing the Disney line for a while, which was awful. And then they were relying on said early experienced people that don't know how to assert themselves to call the next person from 30 feet away. It was a log jam, you know. So I was grateful to see AMC. But when you think about it, AMC bought up a lot of old Carmike stuff. AMC took on a lot of old theaters and just slapped AMC Classic on them. And they're basically crap theaters that should be bulldozed under. And then they're going to keep these high profit margins. Either they've got a broken business model, or they're making too much money anyway and they need to get over it and be more realistic about what we're all doing here. And it's all part of the democratization of film, right? Film used to be a nice thing you could go to if you were kind of upper comfortable or up, you know, above. You know, the regular guy showing up in his PJs to his recliner chair is a modern theater idea. You know, cinema going used to be a big deal. And I think people like me and you that have that nostalgic love for it wouldn't mind if it was more of a big deal. You know, you have to remind people not to talk on phones, because regular people that don't get how to be in public are going to movies. Whereas, you know, Batman origin story days, we're talking fancy, get up in your mink coat to go out to a show, whether it was stage, cinema, music, what have you. They were all the same kind of evening entertainment. So if you're going to have a mass market like that, there's no reason why you shouldn't be just killing it, making money. I don't know why they can't find better ways to be flexible. I don't think the popcorn should have that much to do with their profitability.
Yeah,
and do it right.
You know, I've not really dove into that much with the big chains like AMC and Regal. Up here in Gallatin, we have a small regional chain called NCG, Neighborhood Cinema Group.
Yeah.
And you know, they're a great digital theater, good sound system, but it's really a no frills theater. It's you know, you serve yourself the Coke machines, and the concession prices are pretty reasonable. They're not, you know, Walmart or Walgreens sneak it in your coat reasonable, but they're reasonable enough that you might say, you know what, we don't really have time to run by Walgreens next door and get the theater. We'll just, you know, get it there. And they do really well. You know, I talk to people in the community and they love going there because they're just a very family friendly energy there. It's again, it's no frills. But here's the thing we have to remember, Lucas. We can kind of segue into this whole digital distribution thing. Hey, thanks for joining us, Danny Kazam from Canada. Hope to see you on the flip side. The thing that we have to remember about digital is, or at home distribution, and that's really what we're kind of talking about here is, are we going to see a larger portion of films distributed direct to at-home streaming services? And I think the answer is yes. But I don't think that can or will replace the theater-going experience, because there are people like you and me who love the theater-going experience. We love the giant screen. We love the surround sound. You've invested the time and the science into finding the exact right seat in the theater to experience the entire thing at its fullest.
Right.
And for me, I love just every bit of it. I even old, rundown, dingy theaters, I just love the experience. And for me, nothing comes close to that. And I'll tell you the truth, I hate watching movies at home with my family or when my family is here, because they're looking on their phones, they're talking, they're asking me questions. Why did he do that? I started watching the movie at the same time you did. Let's find out together. It just, that kind of thing drives me insane. But what you really have to remember is we've still got an entire generation that is not part of the digital revolution.
Right.
Yes, our generation is on the cusp of it. The Gen Xers, there are many of our peers that have rejected it. They don't have Netflix. They don't have smartphones. But my dad and my grandparents, or probably your grandparents, my dad's age, 85. What's Netflix?
Right.
He has a flip phone. So there are still parts of this country that don't have high-speed broadband internet, and they really can't access streaming services the way that you and I can in a metro area. And that's going to be something that's really going to have to factor into this. And what I think is going to happen, I think the end result is less quantity in the theaters, more quality, and a combination of more directed digital download releases and big, high quality, big budget blockbusters, either doing both or doing the traditional model of the theatrical release first,
right,
and then the home distribution.
I think Blake's comment there touched on something, that cost factor. That makes sense. 60 might be, who knows? I don't know what the market will bear, but the reality is a lot of people are comfortable in the home environment. They didn't put the recliners in the theater because they thought that would be great theater. They know that people want the comfort. It's probably reasonable to see a high dollar for the at-home day of. I think there's a market in which it splits. I mean, the movie theaters already sacrificed 50% of the seating to go in, or third. Sometimes they're down to a third of the seating for the recliners.
I hate that, Lucas. I don't like the recliners, to be honest with you.
Well, you know why they did it? I actually talked to a manager that I said, how do you run I mean, it seems like you drastically cut your capacity. He said, yeah, but we've got full pre-planning of exactly what we're doing. And so the offset is we know exactly what we've sold. We know that we don't need to run a show. We don't have a seat sold. There's a lot to it. There's a lot that went into it to make it profitable still. So that made sense. I don't know if they have fully developed that, because I know that there are people that don't like the way those recline, like it's all or nothing unless you go to the Atmos theater where you can control the back and the legs separately. So some people have different comfort concerns. I don't mind the space. I don't love that you can't get my favorite seats in multitude like you could, before. It's bigger competition, but I use kind of the same strategy that I've always used to get seats that I want. So that mostly translates. But I don't know if they can afford, especially in a post-COVID world or a end of COVID world, I don't know if they can afford to maintain these little junk theaters that they let hang on. I think they're going to have to let a lot of those go, but they're not worth a lot. That's the other side of that coin.
Well, you're talking about the chains in particular, corporate chains, and there's still a market in small towns like here in Gallatin. There's second and third run theaters.
Totally.
These converted movie palaces from the 30s and 40s that are doing, second and third run movies for $3. And they've all been upgraded to digital screens now and digital sound systems. But, the theater itself is the original architecture, in many cases, the original seating.
Yeah. Well, and the ones
I
that
love
get it, they make it into an experience. The ones that understand it, they've realized that people like the ooh and the ah of going to a first run theater. I've heard, I was here, when they built the Hollywood 27 theater. I think you probably were too. It was love and hate. Some people thought it was ridiculous and gaudy. I loved it because it was built in the 90s, very not 90s, but built in the 90s. And now people like it more than they don't, because it gives that nostalgic vibe. There's something about the cinema design, and I hesitate to say American cinema design, because I refuse to believe that we didn't borrow something from somewhere in the architecture, but I don't know enough about that subject to try to talk about it. But that curved Art Deco, mid-century to earlier, neon, glitz and glam thing is preferable to me, unless you're going to go super slick high tech. And that's why I like the combination of what Regal does with, you've got all that, and then in the back you've got the RPX slick high tech black with blue trim, and there's to me no middle. That gross 90s middle that was every other theater is the stuff that I'm glad to see go. But they realized they had to make it an experience. What they still haven't wrapped their head around is that their problem never was piracy. Their problem was always presentation quality. And it seems like they still don't understand that when tackling this, because the AMC CEO response should have been, okay, we'll get back with you. We'll talk to you about how to split up the revenue on in-theater versus in-home streaming. But what you'll never be able to do is guarantee that Joe Sixpack gives the experience of an AMC theater. He can't say that because he bought all of Carmike's old trash. And they had some trash. So if you don't have a good theater to go to, of course you stay in your recliner at home. I mean, everybody's got a big TV almost. And now soundbar and subwoofer technologies come far enough that most people have decent sound. And it's all individual subjective anyway. So if you like what you've got, you're going to stay home. So they've still focused on the weakest part of the argument in a lot of cases.
So Blake says pay-per-views for a boxing match that may end up being an hour and then 2 hours of replays for all four bouts are about $60 plus.
Yeah.
That's why I don't buy pay-per-views.
Well, I used to do occasionally a wrestling pay-per-view, and that made me understand the economy of your MMA or boxing. But there's clearly change to be had there, and you would think that all the carriers would want in on this. You would think that would be where the real benefit is, except you have the glory of deregulation in the fact that Universal wouldn't have to give skin in the game to Comcast because it's the same damn company. So there would be unfair advantages, But you would think that cable systems and then Amazon, Apple, all of them, they would want to get in on it, and they could still afford to slap something into the cinema. It just needs to be something in the distribution deal that they kick back, like what you cited with the comics. They do something to keep them whole, but people are changing, and this, no matter which part of the equation is correct, we could sit around on Facebook and BS back and forth all the time on the virus itself. The reality is we are where we are. The theaters are closed, and they have to reopen under some pretense of health or health theater or both. And in that world, it's time for change in some way.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that while Universal is talking about releasing all of their new releases simultaneously to home distribution, Disney, Lucasfilm, Marvel, Pixar, they did release Onward digitally at the same time that it went to theaters, because they released it to theaters the week before theaters were shut down. So it was already out there, and they went ahead and made the decision to do what all of the other studios were doing and made it available through Amazon Prime at $19.95 and on Fandango now for $19.95. And I think it was on digital for about a week, and then they pulled the trigger and put it on Disney Plus at no additional cost.
Right.
But Disney is doubling down on theatrical releases, and they have just moved the release dates for all of their big blockbusters to later in the year or into next year, rather than going the digital distribution route. And Bob Iger has been pulled back in. He had retired, and they pulled him back in. And he basically has said, the fact of the matter is our profit margin is still in theatrical release.
Right.
And we don't have the same profits in direct digital releases. So we're not going to do that yet. We're going to hold out, and we're going to release these films in the way they were intended to be released.
Well, when you're dealing with behemoth franchises like Marvel and Star Wars and that sort of thing, you definitely can't make up that revenue. When you're dealing with a Trolls sequel, the money, I got to find the figures, but the money really worked out. It was crazy. Like, they made more on Trolls 2 streaming than they did with Trolls 1 in a certain amount of weeks or something. It was a pretty impressive difference in the rate of earning. And that's a pretty self-contained, the sequel to any CGI movie, as long as it's close to the first one, involves lower overhead, because the character modeling and all the other core work, you've got a system. You just start moving the puppet. You don't have to make the puppet. So I think their margin was good, or their overhead was low. But what you said about those dates, that has been bothering me ever since all this started. Basically anything with a concrete date, going ahead and naming another date hasn't really sat well for me. I think it's double-ended, though I do understand the equation. Since I'm in marketing, I'm in advertising, I get it. You have to do something. You have to commit to something. So some of them have reset dates, and my only problem is, what if, you got Fauci talking about some accelerated treatment option that's coming around. You could wake up tomorrow and somebody develops something. Would you really want to say that you've staked out a September date or something for a movie that was supposed to be March, and then have to push it forward in the calendar just to get, don't you want to start making money day one? I would have indefinitely postponed the mega movies. I would not have put a date on anything that I could turn around and have free news publicity. Like a Marvel film, don't put a date on that. Don't postpone it. Just say indefinitely. Because as soon as the theaters are back open, you can say, hey, guess what? Here's the next film. We know you're all going to see it, and the news is all going to cover it for you for free, because it's a big deal that you're putting movies back. And so it seems a little bit like a weird strategy when some of these, especially the really drastic put off to the 2021 timeframe, it's a little of an alienation of fans, but it's also planting a flag so far out that it just seems odd.
Yeah, I mean, Black Widow went from a May release to November.
Yeah.
And I was just like, why? Why push it that far back? And their rationale is, the blockbuster dates are X, X, and X. And, May, June, July, November, December.
Yeah.
And we can't plan it for July, not knowing what's going on. So we pushed it to the next best blockbuster date, and that caused everything else in their slate to be pushed. And now they're talking 2023 for some of the movies that were supposed to come out next year.
Right. Well, and in a lot of cases, it seems like these guys ought to know better. A lot of them have released the surprise hit movies in the off months that blew our minds on the haul out of the box office. You would think they would be firsthand witnesses to the fact that the models aren't necessarily reliable anymore, that we're not in the same world of reliability of season. And then you would put your movie's alternate date in the middle of the season that viruses are supposed to resurge. Like, if you were going to postpone it, wouldn't you postpone it to like the hot months when they say this is when we should have the most relief from this issue? Not, hey, in the winter it'll resurge, so let's put November on our movie. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It seems like it's a gotta do something decision instead of a be okay with no decision kind of decision.
Well, and for Disney, this whole thing has been bad news for them, because they are currently losing $30 million a day. How do you lose that much money in a day? And it's all tied to their diversification, right? They get revenue from so many different little things
right.
that are all affected by this. It's not just their movie business, but that's a big chunk of it.
Yeah.
And, the biggest problem I'm having right now is with the streaming services having new content.
Yeah.
And Disney Plus, listen, I love Disney Plus, but all of their new content has been delayed.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, Clone Wars is coming to an end in 2 weeks. It's been great, but there's no other new content on that platform until the fall with the next season of The Mandalorian. And we've been expecting to see Loki, Winter Soldier, those Marvel shows coming, and they've been delayed. And I'm seeing the same problem with Netflix. They're running out of original new content, and that's going to be a big problem for the streaming services, I think. And will the film studios that have stuff in the can fill those gaps? I don't know.
Well, I'm a little concerned about the production, which is one of the reasons that I'm, when it comes to opening up the economy, to me, production should be one of the easy ones.
Yeah, I would think so too.
You've got a controlled environment. I was talking about this on the panel over the weekend at COVIDCon. You've got a controlled environment. You can test everybody. You can really make sure that you're dealing with something that you're familiar with. And things like the Walking Dead season finale got pushed off because they couldn't do the post-production and the effects because of the virus. And that one struck me as odd because I could see you can't. Okay, all right, we can't do it next week. Okay,
well, can't those guys do that remotely?
That's my whole point. But within 2 weeks, can't you ship them their rig to their house and they can do their rendering and modeling? I mean, maybe there's a server farm and there's some other complications, but it just doesn't seem like that made any sense. And I don't know what other variables I'm not aware of, so I just have to roll with it. But part of what I'm sure some of them are afraid of is if they blow too much content they've already got, how are they going to create anything new? Or are they so far behind in creating the new stuff that they can't keep it rolling fast enough? But I don't know if we just don't need to alter our models a little bit. I mean, when you or me were teenagers, you couldn't have told us that that TV would be anything like it is now. You know, we were 22, 23 episodes broadcast. There was an off season, you know, the whole 9 yards. Binging didn't exist. I remember
You had to watch it live.
Yeah. I remember sitting in mass comm class at MTSU being told that the world we have now would be the world of entertainment and thinking, boy, that's neat. I don't think I'll ever see that, but that sure is a cool idea. And then lo and behold, here it is. So just because you couldn't have ever imagined we would have 10 or 13 season television these days that's streaming doesn't mean we can't also change the game again. And now episodes come out every 2 weeks. Now, you know, we do a different thing with the flow to buy ourselves a little time, but to keep relevance, because it's not really there's the fan angle. Like, I want to see it and I want it now, you know, kick and scream. That's the fanboy thing. That's not crucial. But what is crucial for your franchise in some cases is keeping the audience engaged, keeping the interest. And if they lose relevance for long enough, who knows how they'll recover some of that.
Well, and that's why I have liked the Disney Plus model of releasing an episode once a week. Mm-hmm. And it keeps you on the hook longer. And it you remember when we were kids, must-see TV on Thursday nights, NBC. And, you know, by doing that, you create that atmosphere again, and it keeps your fan base engaged longer. You know, the whole thing with The Mandalorian, man, there were new memes and tweets and Resurgence every week about the next episode, and you didn't have that with like Stranger Things. Stranger Things, you had one big weekend where everybody binged it and talked about for a few more days after that, and then it was kind of gone.
They have to create their own social media impact. They go back to it and they make compilation videos for the holidays or greatest hit moments and all these other things, but they don't get that pop, like you said, about Mandalorian. And as frustrating as it is to be watching Mandalorian, just you really want that next one, it makes more sense that you get that re-up every week and the culture spikes every week on that scale.
And it gives you some new anticipation. You know, I'm one of those people, I like to have something to look forward to every day.
Mm-hmm.
And when Mandalorian was going with Clone Wars, Friday is my day, man. I can't wait to get home and watch the latest episode. Blake said All at Once TV may need to go back to weekly like it used to be, like we're talking about. And he says that they did have, Netflix had limited series that was weekly, and some did well, and some people had more demand. I don't remember them doing once a week distribution at Netflix, but that may have been before I totally sold out to Netflix.
You know, bringing up Netflix, that's another angle. There was a buzz this week about the Academy changing some of their rules. And of course, we know Golden Globes has been honoring all forms of media more universally, and they had a lot of streaming winners. I think the cinema thing is tied into this Academy thing. So you have a lot of times, like look at The Irishman. You know, you have a close release or a simultaneous release with Netflix where something comes along and there it is at home. And if they're also eligible for awards, that creates kind of a multi-layered threat to the way that all of these people are used to doing business. So part of it is just a refusal to change old habits, but they're going to have to figure out ways to deal with it. I mean, one of the biggest things I've been just wrapping my head around from an audience management standpoint is, let's say that you open theaters. Well, we've seen the guidelines for restaurants from multiple states and cities. 50% capacity. I've talked to a lot of restaurants that are planning to pull out half the tables and space things differently. And, you know, we've seen Waffle House featured in the news talking about how they're letting people have a booth of empty gap and all this stuff. Well, okay, you apply that to a venue or a theater. That's a whole new layer of technology that you have to add. You know, normally you could go in, you could select 3 seats, and the next person could select the next 3 seats. But now there's going to have to be software capability in these seat selling realm, where I bought these 3 seats and now it's going to leave a seat empty on either side. And is that even economically sound? Can they even operate venues or theaters in that way and still afford to be open, much like restaurants? I mean, I look around Nashville and the rent that I know is being paid, and it's like, I don't see how you can run a restaurant on 50% capacity and survive.
Some can't.
Right.
Some can't.
So can theaters do that or not? I mean,
will close permanently.
AMC's,
and we'll never see them come back.
Right. And AMC's been dancing with bankruptcy for a reason. So can they reduce the seating capacity and open, or would it be in their best interest to have streaming if they can get a piece of that pie? So it's really a weird thing to think about. There are a lot of factors involved, and that workforce is a piece of that. I mean, I would love to go to a theater. Believe me, I've wished I could go out to a movie multiple times since this began. But the one thing I don't have an interest in is a 16-year-old kid that has no idea how to deal with their own life contaminating my soda. And I think people are going to be freaky like that. There are a lot of germaphobes. I'm pretty middle of the road, but there are a lot of germaphobes that are terrified right now. How do you get the public to perceive that there's safety being involved in your popcorn scooping? I mean, so how many times has a theater popcorn scooper been up to their elbow in that trough?
Yeah. So
I mean, there's a lot going on there.
So I was thrilled to find out that this Friday, the Stardust movie theater in Watertown, the drive-in theater, is reopening, and they are allowing you to bring your own food.
Yeah.
What a great solution. I can't figure out why a drive-in theater would have shut down to begin with. But I've not been to a drive-in theater in 25 years.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to go this weekend.
And what's interesting is because of my blog activity, I get a lot of the media alerts, and I actually pulled this one up when you said that because I asked for the screening link because I want to watch this film in order to direct people to find their nearest drive-in. If I think it's a great movie, which it looks good, it's The Wretched. It's a horror film, and it's opening at Stardust, and it's in their little list. There's like 13 drive-through cinemas or drive-in cinemas that are listed on this media information. And when I replied to them, I said, this is great because I really think people would be enriched by going out and checking out a drive-in. Let me get the screener link. Let me watch the movie and get out there and try to endorse that it's a thing that's worth an experience. The movie doesn't even have to be that good just to get you out and showing that to your kid that's never even heard of the idea. And that's the first thing I mentioned when I read all this. I turned around and I said, we need to go to a drive-in movie at some point and support that piece of this equation.
Well, one of the movies I've wanted to see, and I haven't yet, was Sonic. Because, again, it came out right before all of this happened. And it's playing at the Stardust this weekend. And you can get it at Redbox already for $1.50. But you know what? There's something magical about that theater experience. And, I really want to take my kids to a drive-in theater. When I was a kid in the 70s, I'm giving my age away. I'm much older than you guys think I am. We did the drive-in theater all the time. And that was the thing to do when I was growing up in North Canton. We had the traditional, theater releases as well. But, Saturday night, everybody after bowling went across the street to the drive-in theater. And, you hung out at the concession stand and you could still hear the movie through the concession stand speakers. And I don't know, it was just a magical time. And I think we've lost something in that. And now with the way that they've engineered sound, that it comes right through your car stereo. You don't hang the speaker on the window anymore.
Right.
You get the full surround sound experience and the comfort of your own vehicle. You don't have to touch anyone if you don't want to. And now that they're letting you bring your own food, what's stopping you? And it's $8 a person.
Well, and we also probably need to support that because it could potentially be part of the offset of certain other events. don't know if it might not become a thing that pro football starts to do a reduced seating capacity and some kind of elevated tailgating experience. Same with baseball, maybe. There's a lot of outdoor focused sport. I don't know how hockey is going to get by, but and soccer. I mean, I'm a believer, as many people know, in the soccer thing, but this is a hell of a market to try to open a soccer stadium in for Nashville. So the whole game changed on that with all of this going on. But will you find that there is an adopting of the technology and format of a drive-in theater where you have a VIP parking lot with giant screens and you can tune into the game's sound and you're paying a lower price, but you're there with the party, and it kind of offsets the fact that inside the stadium now it's 2 seat gaps between every group or something?
Joe McKeel says he remembers seeing Kurt Russell Disney movies at the drive-in. Dobie McGillis, and look, I saw Herbie the Love Bug and the Benji movies and all of those 70s movies at the drive-in. It was great. It was great. And I think there's a definite place for that. I guess in my envisioning in this, Lucas, I think we are going to see a return to smaller audiences, smaller venue sizes. I'm thinking about the Palace Theater in Gallatin. It's a 150-seat theater, single screen.
Yeah.
And I think as down the line, maybe some of the megaplexes go away and we see a return of the single screen theaters. I would love to see that resurgence in the drive-in theater. But I think ultimately what is going to happen is what I've been screaming for 25 years. And that is, we're going to see a reduction in the glut of movies that make it to the big screen.
Yeah, that's true.
And we'll get higher quality at the end of the day.
I think you're probably right about that. I hadn't really thought about that angle, but that makes a lot of sense. That I was thinking about people, which I think will happen, and you were thinking about films, and I think that those two are gonna meet. I think the how the hell did that movie ever get made theory will start to go into the streaming bubble. Of course, there's plenty of things on Netflix originals.
Oh my God, yes.
That are like that. I mean, I'm still waiting for the score to even up on Netflix originals that have ended with me going, to the ones that are like, oh wow, I got it.
Speaking of which,
but the people I think will thin out. I think we'll see that it might become a little more prohibitive to attend the cinema to offset their losses and rebuild their market. But you'll get to watch at home probably if you are too common to afford the theater going experience in the new era. You'll be able to watch at home. And then what you said about the content changing, I think that'll be a big deal. I think that might be a big piece of it.
Yeah, and Crystal Raven Jones says, please bring back proper theater etiquette when you do. That will be a natural outcome. If they have to charge more for the theater experience to keep the riffraff out, as Opryland used to call it, or say about their ticket prices, then you will see a higher level of theater etiquette too, as a natural outcome of that.
It's funny. Maybe none of the people that are tuned in, and I don't think I've ever told you this story, but on that line of thinking, I actually ejected a guy from a theater personally once, and it was a liberating experience. And it was cold, and it was late. It was the last show, so I took him by the elbow and I walked him out the front door, shoved him through the door, closed and latched the door behind him, and he was left outside in the cold for raising a ruckus. It was something about a girl, and somebody threw a Coke on somebody. I had it, and nobody was coming from management, so I just said, you and you, let's go. And I had recently worked for theaters, so I had a confidence that I could explain myself to the management. They asked me to leave later, and they gave me a ticket to come back, but I've made it clear that if they'd done their job in the first place, that we wouldn't have had a problem.
Oh, listen, I've escorted kids out of the theater as a movie going patron. I've turned around and grabbed them and taken them out. I don't take that stuff. I'm like, turn your phone off, shut up, and anyway.
Good for you. It takes a village.
Yeah, Blake Wilson says 238 Adam Sandler films on Netflix will be the cure of COVID-19.
I hope there aren't
a couple of decent ones. Chris Raven says good for you.
Oh boy, it'll be interesting to see how this all comes back around. I hope we don't lose some of the drive-in is a nice way that we're not going to lose the American cinema experience, but I hope we don't lose some things. There are plenty of things that they could close tomorrow and I wouldn't care, but there are a couple of theaters I would like to see them make it because they're really well done. But there's some stuff that's too big for all reason. I mean, Opry Mills and Thoroughbred, they're 20 plexes. That's a lot. That may be more than can make it through the economy, but at the same time, those smaller houses inside those theaters weren't paying any bills anyway. So
no, but you could. So if we see less quantity, higher quality, and those 20 plexes, instead of running a movie on 4 screens, now they're running the same movie on 10 screens.
Right.
And they can social distance in those theaters and use the space that they weren't using before because nobody was going to go see, Bride of Chucky 7. They can maybe do the social distancing and still make the profit margin. I don't know.
That's another technology space too. If they could come up with dynamic seating and whatever the one-to-one relationship between the movie and the actual theater house is, because there's clearly still one. I mean, it used to be this 40-pound roll of film is parked at this theater, and by God, that's where it plays.
Right.
That's not a thing
in a heartbeat now.
Yeah, but I don't know what's involved in that. There seems to be some kind of, it's probably the relationship to the number of seats and the licensing. But if they can get past that and get dynamic seating, you could see fluctuations. You could see changes. You could see 7 o'clock on a Friday, 5 theaters because of social distancing are playing the big movie. But on a Sunday afternoon, it's 2 theaters. And you could dynamically seat people, but then you'd have to do all sorts of other things theaters don't want to do, like maintain them all the same way and make sure they all have the same technical capabilities.
I'll tell you what,
a huge sticking point.
One of the most pleasurable movie experiences I've ever had in recent years. And Crystal Raven Jones says she almost beat the crap out of a woman in Poplar Bluff for yakking all the way through Jurassic Park. I can see that happening, Crystal. When I went and saw Blade Runner 2049, is that right? The right number?
I think so.
2049, yeah. I was the only one in there. And it was at Regal Green Hills or Regal 100 Oaks. It was the last day it was going to be playing in Nashville. The last theater, the last day, I was the only one in that theater. And I was so glad I got to see that movie on the big screen. Right. Because, listen, I don't care how good your sound system is. That movie was sound engineered for that theater experience. Oh, yeah. And people who didn't see that movie in the theater miss a lot in the sound engineering experience. And,
and there may be a need to start, I don't know how they would do it, treating some of the movies after their first 2-week run is over as almost like a crowdsource. Like if 5 tickets aren't sold, we're not playing it, So while that would have robbed you of that experience, it would keep them from running a theater. I mean, I tell people all the time from my days of working in a theater, the poor guy by himself on Christmas Eve at 10 p.m. that showed up to see Meet Joe Black. It was the most depressing thing I've ever encountered. It's Christmas Eve, and I was thinking, hey, I've got it made. Nobody's bought any tickets. And then one ticket sells for Meet Joe Black, Christmas Eve, this one lonely guy by himself. Like, I was both angry and sad for him all at the same time. But that kind of phenomenon, you think about it, that whole place is open. The lobby has to be lit. If I could have left, I don't know how many dollars it is, but that's an incremental, you do that every night. If you're able to say, sorry, we're not showing movies because only one ticket was sold, then you could do something with that. And technology would make it possible, because you could say, you got to buy your ticket by an hour out. And then in an hour from the movie, you can tell people, hey, sorry, we don't have any tickets sold. There's a lot of tech solutions.
I actually have feedback for you on that. So coming from a live theater background, I was working with a theater here in Nashville that did a production of Rent, and professional production, co-directed by Joyce DeWitt from Three's Company. There was a lot of money behind this, tons of advertising.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason in Nashville, the Nashville Dinner Theater couldn't sell enough tickets to Rent. And they closed shows. They canceled shows.
Wow.
And what ended up happening is their regulars who came for like their season stopped buying season tickets. Because now it's unpredictable. Are we going to be able to go or not?
Right.
And I've always had the philosophy that whether there's one person in the audience or 1,000, I'm going to give them the exact same show.
Right.
Because I don't want to develop a reputation for closing or canceling when there's not a big enough audience, because that spirals, it snowballs, and it creates a reputation. And the Gallatin Theater, the Palace that I've mentioned dozens of times, they do that all the time. They show second run movies.
Yeah.
But if not enough people show up on a Saturday afternoon, they close. So you never know from weekend to weekend if they're going to be open and showing movies or not. So why even bother?
But they're kind of independent.
They are.
So
but that would
you almost expect that. That's kind of like your neighborhood bar that, on a slow night, you might walk in and they tell you, yeah, we're closing. Sorry.
Yeah, but maybe that can work on the smaller mom and pop hometown level. I don't think it has worked for them, but on a corporate level, I don't think that can work overall.
Yeah, that's fair point.
But hey, the movie theater or the drive-in, they're open 7 days a week, but they're only doing the 4 films, the 2 screens, 4 films on the weekends.
Okay.
So maybe that's how you manage that is
right.
Hey, Monday through Wednesday, we don't have all of the movies you want to see.
Right.
But,
and there already are a ton of showtimes. I mean, they could always start their day at, they could go evening only during the week, unless it's the summer break. There are lots of different ways that those schedules could work. And then the problem comes outside the theater, and it becomes a job market employment issue. It's a separate topic, but at least that's not their problem at that point. Like, when it comes to running their business, there are ways, like you said, of scaling what they're putting up.
Well, so I want to hit a couple more comments. We're just past an hour. I don't want to go much longer.
Sure.
But Blake Wilson says 254.9 surround sound. I guess he's talking about Blade Runner. I don't know.
I don't think it had 9 subwoofers.
Yeah, I don't know. And then Joe McKeel says, when we talk, remind me to tell you of the story of the 350-pound man at the first screening of The Lord of the Rings. And I think we all know that
sounds
guy.
like fun.
I think we've all had an experience with someone like that.
That's funny. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So for those of you who are watching, whether you're watching live or on a repeat or through a watch party, continue to comment because we'll see your comments. We'll respond. We'll answer back. Share this with other people and let us know what you think about our analysis of the movie business. I mean, we could talk about this for days and not have any definitive answers or projections, but it's nice to kind of know that there are people that we're in sync with, that we're all kind of thinking the same thing. And I think the people watching have probably agreed with us for the most part. And see, guys, it's not all politics and religion and COVID-19.
Have you been accused of being a one-trick pony lately?
No. But it seems like that's all anybody wants to talk about anymore.
That's true.
And for those of you out there who don't know how to get along with your politically diverse friends, take a cue from Lucas and I. We have more things in common, more things that bring us together than divide us.
Yeah,
and the thing
and on all the rest of it, the other guy is batshit crazy.
That's pretty much true. That's pretty much true. But even that's fun sometimes.
Absolutely.
I love calling you a pinko commie.
Yeah. I should one day adopt all the modern trends and get really upset and disown you and block you just for a day. I should live like a butthurt trend for a day. That's going to be the hashtag, butthurt trend for a day.
That's funny. I love it. Or the mentally diverse, Eli Cash says. So the politically, religiously, and mentally diverse. That's funny. All right. Well, Lucas, any last words you want to tell people how to find you, find some of your work,
sure,
your ramblings?
If you do a search for The Stump, that's the blog. Used to be a column on zombies in my blog, and I spun it off to its own space. I still have a lot of work to do there and a lot more content to cover, but it's giving me the flexibility to talk a little bit more outside of just movies and pop arts. But that is a heavy focus, mostly geek spun, sticking to my roots. So check that out there. And then, I'm on any of my other pages, depending on whatever's being talked about. I'm tossing around ideas and critiques and topics, and hopefully get to writing a lot more soon and get my video act together and get my YouTube tidied up and put some content there too.
Well, you look good. You got the lights going. I didn't bring in the studio lights into the office tonight. I was a little bit lazy, but you look good. You sound good. So carry on, my wayward son.
Great. You too, man.
Yeah. So everybody watching, thanks for tuning in. Again, share this with your friends. And Lucas, maybe our next discussion needs to be the future of cons.
Yeah. That was a good bit of the panel the other day, and there's plenty more to talk about. So it'd be interesting to see. I'd really like to find out what Dragon Con plans to do. We'll get to that one.
All right, we'll do it. For the rest of you, thanks for tuning in. And until the next time, we'll catch you on the flip side.
Good night.
You're welcome.